using the Google form that's available under the YouTube Live description. If you don't see the link to the form, you can refresh your YouTube live stream. It should show up. If you're attending in person, the purple form that looks like this, I have lots of papers, that looks like this is on the table near the door in the room, is available back there. So at this point, I'm going to ask everyone to stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I am now going to move directly into the portion of the meeting that happens maybe once a year. And that will be the organization meeting where we elect a governing board president at the beginning of each calendar year and a governing board vice president. So we're going to move into that section right now. And I would like to go ahead and open nominations for the office of president for the calendar year 2025. Do we have any nominations for president to throw on the table here?
I would like to make a nomination, if I may.
Please.
I would like to nominate Amy Kraus for the office of president of Catalina Foothills Governing Board for the calendar year 2025. Amy has been a longstanding board member. I believe this is year number 13, if I've counted correctly. So I think it is. Immense experience on the school board.
10.
It's 10.
10.
Is it 10? Okay. You're 10. Apologies.
10, 14.
10, 14. Potato. Apologies. I did count earlier and I thought I had it right. I apologize for that. 10 years of experience on the board. She's proven herself to be a dedicated board member who constantly and consistently strives to put the district's needs first. I have full faith in her ability to lead the board with excellence, and I am honored and humbled to nominate her for the position.
What an excellent nomination. Thank you. That was
Thank you. I didn't even write it myself.
Do we have other nominations for the office of president for 2025? Okay, if there are no other nominations, would someone make a motion to close the nominations for the office of president?
I move the nominations be closed.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we call it that way? All right, we have a motion and a second to close nominations. All those in favor of closing nominations for the office of president, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries 5-0. We have closed the nomination for the office of president. So at this point, would someone like to make a motion to move to elect Amy Kraus as president for our 2025 calendar year?
I would like to make that motion, if I may, Madam President.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to elect Amy Kraus as our governing board president for 2025. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Amy, and your job starts right now.
Right this second.
Swap it out.
Swapping of the seats.
Here we go.
Thank you. And Eileen, thank you for doing it for the past 2 years. My
It's been
goodness.
fun. I love this job. I love this job. I love this board. And it's truly an honor to turn the presidency over to you.
Well, it's been a few years since I've sat in this seat, so
Yeah.
let's see if I remember what to do. I have to just do the repeat of what Eileen just did
Yes.
for the vice president. So let's see if I can do it in the right order. I know we have to switch some. We have a bunch of things here that are yours and mine. That's okay. We'll figure it out. And thank you for your confidence in me. So at this point, I would like to open the nominations for the office of vice president. And as with president, it's simply a nomination. No second is required.
I would like to nominate Eileen Jackson for the office of vice president.
Are there any other nominations for vice president? If there are no other nominations for vice president of the board, then can I have a motion to close the nominations?
Move the nominations be closed.
Do you need a second for the nominations to be closed?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to close nominations. Please vote then to close the nomination of Eileen Jackson for the office of vice president. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now is the time to hear a motion, if someone would like to make one, to elect Eileen Jackson as vice president of the Catalina Foothills Governing Board.
I move Eileen Jackson be elected Vice President of the Catalina Foothills Governing Board.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to elect Eileen Jackson as vice president of the Catalina Foothills School District Governing Board. All in favor, please say aye.
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 There's no opposed because I heard 5 yeas. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, that was exciting.
There you go.
And we did it right.
Perfect. Okay. Do you want an agenda?
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Oh, you are welcome.
Well, you know what? Let's switch water bottles too.
Oh, yeah, that would be
and your name-
helpful.
And I did not touch the food. Name plates.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
And the nameplates.
Hmm?
The nameplates.
Oh, our nameplates.
Oh. Should have had a list of things.
All right.
We need one of those staffs, like, you know, how they come in and clean out the Oval Office
Oh, right.
during the inauguration
Yeah.
ceremonies.
Set it
We need
back.
someone to come do that for us. Okay.
Okay, let me get my paperwork in order, go back to our agenda. Okay, well, that concludes items 3.3 and 3.4 of our opening. You read the rules of order for governing board
No,
meetings,
all I
did
did
you
was
not?
the welcome. I did not read the
Oh.
full rules of order, so there'll be a section right below where I stopped reading. That is the full rules of
Ah.
order that you'll read in.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So at this time, I will read the rules of order for governing board meetings. The governing board welcomes public comments at its meetings by providing 2 opportunities for the public to address the board. If your topic of interest is not on the agenda, you may address the board during the public comments time slot near the beginning of the meeting. Or if the topic is on the agenda, you may speak just prior to the discussion of that agenda topic. In the event there is a public hearing, there is not a public hearing this evening, the opportunity to speak will be reopened. If you are joining remotely and wish to make a public comment, you should have already submitted the Google form provided with the YouTube link. For those attending in person, please hand a completed purple form, request to address the governing board, to our board secretary. I don't believe I have received any this evening. Okay. The information requested on the form is required for our meeting minutes. Speakers will be called on when it's their turn to address the board. For those attending remotely, and I didn't check yet to see if anyone has logged in. Doesn't appear that anybody has, but if anybody is planning to attend remotely and speak remotely, then you may choose to enable your camera. As a reminder to remote attendees who wish to speak, please unmute your microphone when called upon. Each speaker has 2 minutes to address the board. The sound of a buzzer indicates the end of your time. In the event of a large number of speakers, the board may need to limit that time so that we can conduct the business on this agenda. By law, the board cannot discuss, consider, or vote on topics that are not on the agenda. This assures the community that they are aware of the topics that will be discussed this evening. If you wish to discuss a topic through written communication, board members' contact information can be found on the district website. We appreciate the community's attendance and comments at this meeting. So, that brings us to item 3.6, outstanding achievements, and I will turn that over to Dr. Bartlett.
Thank you. Even though we haven't been in school for the past 2 weeks, or 2 weeks of winter break, Our CFHS Robotics had a very successful tournament, the Diamondback Qualifier, on December 14th, that was held at San Miguel High School. Our Pioneer 327 secured a place as the first team selected for the Winning Alliance and earned the Connect Award for their outstanding community outreach and dedication to fostering STEM opportunities. So their performance earned them a spot at the first Tech Challenge State Championships, which will take place at Northern Arizona University.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so the team developed a tactile auditory app to support special needs students in programming Lego robotics in our elementary schools.
Wow.
Team members actively mentor younger robotic teams in the First Lego League, and their initiatives reflect their deep commitment to making STEM accessible, inclusive, and impactful for all learners. And of note, the Pioneer Robotics has earned significant support from leading engineering and technology companies throughout the state. So the partnerships provide essential financial resources to affirm Pioneer Robotics' role as one of the state's top high school robotics teams. So the sponsors include Rev Robotics, Texas Instruments, IBM, Caterpillar, DLIS Coherent, ARCA, and Bay Systems. So really substantial. But their achievements exemplify the values of our district and the importance of STEM education, and that we are preparing students for the future success. We also have 2 students at the high school, Fox Foster and Brian Zhang. They've been named as the 2025 Flynn Scholarship finalists, a distinction awarded to only 78 of Arizona's top high school students. So it's quite an honor. It's in recognition of their exceptional academic achievements, leadership qualities, and dedication to community service. So we wish them well as they move forward in the selection process and celebrate this remarkable milestone in their journey.
How many Flynn Scholars are actually chosen each year? Is it a different number each year, or is it
That I don't know.
static number?
Did you know?
I believe it. I believe
20?
it changes.
Changes?
20 are chosen out of
20 of them?
78. So 20 out of 78. And then 2, late breaking, our DECA club. So DECA is, it's called Distributive Education Clubs of America, and it prepares students for careers in marketing, finance, hospitality, and management. Our DECA students, chapter shown brightly at the District 3 Regional Leadership Conference in competitions on Friday, January 10th. They represented CFHS with integrity and sportsmanship, held at the Rotary Education Center in Sierra Vista. Our team competed against 200 students from across Southern Arizona and achieved outstanding results. 24 of our 29 members earned the highest, at least 1 medal, and 20 members have already secured their spots in the state competitions taking place on February 27th through March 1st. And 4 additional members are waiting final rubric results, which may qualify with them for state as well.
That's amazing.
And then finally, we want to say congratulations to our school Palm Line for their outstanding performance at the recent UDA dance competition on Saturday, January 11th. Our varsity Palm Line earned first place in large palm and second place in large jazz. So all of the names of the Palm students, as well as the DECA students and our high school robotics team members, will be in the border tomorrow so that they can see their name in print.
Nice.
Yes,
Thank you, Dr. Bartlett.
you're welcome.
The next item on our agenda is the presentation of the Catalina Foothills Star Award, which I'm presenting before I knew I'd be sitting in this chair, so it wasn't meant to be like the Amy Krause show tonight, anything like that. But the Star Awards and outstanding achievements are really the best part of our board meeting. Not that all of our work isn't important, but when we get to really recognize our students and people of our community that really excel and help us do the things we need to do, that's what we love to celebrate. And we try to have some kind of recognition or celebration at every board meeting. So if you'll bear with me while I grab my stuff, and I'm going to go to the podium, and then we'll get started on the Star Award.
Certificates are right there.
Thank you. This.
You sign by the outgoing.
And I need this. Okay. So once again, I would like to welcome everyone and my fellow board members to the first board meeting, our school board meeting of 2025, and therefore our first Star Award presentation of the new year. And as I said, Star Awards are one of a few different ways that the board recognizes and shows our appreciation for people in our CFSD community who excel and contribute to the district's mission, which is to ensure that every student is prepared for life beyond our walls. This evening, we're recognizing two individuals whose work is essential to achieving that mission, but who largely work behind the scenes. Brian McNitt, CFSD's Director of Facilities and Transportation, and Carolyn Sievert, happy birthday today, CFSD's Procurement Specialist. Together, Mr. McNitt and Ms. Sievert ensure that the district's properties are safe and functional and well-maintained. In other words, they take care of our walls. Let me give you a little bit about their respective backgrounds. Mr. McNitt came to CFSD in 2007 as a maintenance technician after working for several heating and cooling companies in Tucson and before that Las Vegas. Mr. McNitt was responsible for the HVAC and energy management systems in the district. His supervisors noted that he was knowledgeable and had a great understanding of HVAC and electrical systems, and noted that he could solve just about any problem that he runs into. Mr. McNitt received 3 promotions before being named the Director of Facilities and Transportation in the middle of the 22-23 school year. Carolyn Sievert started in the district as an inventory control clerk in the 2018-2019 school year. In this role, she was responsible for inventorying and maintaining records of our capital assets. The following year, Ms. Sievert was promoted to Procurement Specialist, and in this role, she is responsible for sourcing and purchasing goods and services for CFSD by identifying potential suppliers, negotiating contracts, and ensuring timely delivery of products that meet quality standards and optimizing costs. She is the liaison between CFSD and our vendors to acquire goods and services necessary to operate the district. So Mr. McNitt manages the day-to-day operations of each of our buildings, and he oversees the maintenance of school grounds, including landscaping and pest control, and as his title denotes, transportation. He's also responsible for developing long-term plans for facility improvements, renovations, and new construction projects. This is another juncture where Ms. Sievert and Mr. McNitt work closely to ensure that once a facilities project has been identified and approved by the governing board and gets underway, that project gets completed as expected, on time, and on budget. Everyone in this room knows that public school funding is always a challenge. And we also know that CFSD is incredibly fortunate to have the support of our constituents who consistently vote to tax ourselves in order to provide additional funds to our schools. That's funding beyond what the state provides. I believe that CFSD has earned that support by consistently demonstrating a commitment to fiscal responsibility. One aspect of that fiscal responsibility is Mr. McNitt and Ms. Sievert's efforts to ensure that building renewal grants from the State School Facilities Division come to us. These funds are earmarked for major renovations and repairs of a building, upgrades to building systems that will maintain or extend the useful life of a building, and for infrastructure costs. In the past 2 years, you can see on your screen, in the past 2 years, directly as a result of Mr. McNitt and Ms. Sievert's work, CFSD has received, I'm going to say this twice, maybe I'll say it once, $4,628,778.61 in building renewal funds. I've been on this board between 10 and 14 years, and and I can tell you, you know, this is the last 2 years, but this is not by any means the extent of all the building renewal grants that we've received. But it's remarkable, the funds that you have secured for us just in these 2 years. And you can see every single school has had grant-funded projects that are completed or in progress. They cover things like weatherization, which makes a building more energy efficient and protects it from the elements. It covers roofing repairs and upgrades, electrical system work, HVAC replacement, sewer line repairs, and parapet repairs. Now, granted, none of these things are as sexy as the new orchestra building, which I bet you two also had a hand in for a long time, but they are literally the foundations of our buildings, and they're necessary to keep our schools functioning effectively and efficiently. So just a couple of examples from the past 2 years, which I culled from these 2 pages that you can see. Weatherization at 3 schools, Canyon View, Manzanita, and Orange Grove. Costs were between $500,000 or up to over $750,000 per school. Roofing at all schools, $586,000. And a single chiller at our high school, $675,000. So while obtaining school facilities grants may sound tangential to CFSD's mission, it really isn't. These grant-funded projects are high-cost items that would deplete our district additional assistance funds quickly, and they certainly would draw out the timeline for getting these projects done. By tapping into this valuable funding source, we are able to move our DAA funds to our maintenance and operations budget, which by far accounts for people, our personnel, employee salaries, wages, benefits, things like that. And in addition, keeping our school buildings up and running efficiently and in good repair means that CFSE's students and staff are doing their work in a safe and healthy environment, one that is conducive to learning. Mr. McNitt and Ms. Sievert, the governing board recognizes your significant contribution to achieving our district's mission, and we'd like to present you with these STAR Awards as a token of our sincere appreciation. So come join me. And what I'm going to give each of you is a certificate of recognition and also a pin of excellence, which has our district mission on it. And I want to say thank you so much and happy birthday to both of us. You are welcome to say something if you'd like to. I don't know if Dr. Bartlett, who's probably your direct supervisors, would like to add anything.
Well, working with Brian has been a pleasure, and Carolyn for their work that they're doing to secure the funding that we need to provide these the resources for our buildings. You can see the cost of the items that we are procuring from the School Facilities Board, and without those, it would be very, very difficult to maintain our campuses and our facilities to the standard that we want them. And so with their help and their diligence, really, I mean, Brian walks the campuses very frequently, and he assesses the needs that we have, and I sometimes joke that I am a parent of a teenager again when I'm working with Brian, because it's, can I have some more money? Can I have some more money? Can I have some more money? But all in good fun. It's essential that we keep our facilities up to speed and up to the efficiency that we want them, as well as just the standard with which our students deserve. So I appreciate both of your work in maintaining that standard.
I appreciate your leadership and your support.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
So if we're gonna,
Yeah, you have to take a photo.
Well, let's get one right
Oh.
there.
Oh my goodness, okay.
The numbers.
In front of the numbers.
No? Should I go out or in?
I think you should be in.
welcome to stay for the remainder of our meeting, but we understand it's 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night. We all had long days, so
Thank you again, Brian and Carolyn.
if you have elsewhere to be, we certainly understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a lot of money.
This is,
a
well, when
very-
you consider we
yes.
only get 3 million a year in DAA.
Yeah,
And we've
right.
got 3 that are going to be signed.
I
or
know,
We have
signed
5
a whole
more.
bunch
We have
of them
5
in the
more that
book
are going to be signed.
today. And just the whole idea of it being a grant process, it's time consuming to
Yeah, it
fill out
is.
the
It
grant
is.
reports and
It is.
it's really valuable.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
And our facilities remain beautiful. I mean, they're
Oh, they
really
are
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes.
Anytime I've ever attended anything at the high school in the auditorium, just general public thing, people are always amazed at
Yes.
how lovely the facility is and how well maintained.
Yes.
And even the older schools, like Sunrise Drive or Canyon View, I mean, they're amazing.
Here.
That's
And it's to every detail. So when we're doing it construction, it's, well, we probably need to change some of our landscaping to make it, to spruce it up as well. So it's every detail. It's not just
Right.
the mechanical part of it.
Right.
It's the aesthetics as well.
Right. Well, and the gratitude just keeps coming tonight. Because the next item on our agenda is 3.8, the CFSD Foundation Semi-Annual Gift to the District. And I would like to invite Amy Morales-Baum, the foundation president, to come forward. And is there a board member who could? Yeah. Thank you. That's a big check.
Do you want to, I don't know if you wanted to say anything at the podium?
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. Congratulations to everyone on your new posts. Thank you for your leadership of the district, not only for our governing board members, but for all of those who lead our district as employees. I am honored to present this check on behalf of the CFSD Foundation as a parent and as a member and president of the board. As many of you know, the foundation has been in existence for over 40 years now. And the mission has changed a little bit over the years, but for some time now, our mission is to raise supplemental funds to attract, develop, and retain excellent educators for our district, which, as all of us know in this room, this district would not be what it is without the excellent educators that we have. And that really is the foundation for students who thrive. And so, again, it is my true honor to lead this effort along with many other volunteer parents who give of their time, effort, and resources, many businesses in the district, invested community members who give to our funds to be able to make sure that we have these funds to support the Great Beginnings program, which mentors and coaches and provides professional development for our educators. And so we are honored and pleased to present this check for $50,000 for this first half of the year, and there will be more to come in the second half of the year. And again, thank you so much, and we know that it will be used well. And so, thank you.
I'd just like to take a really quick moment to express the board's deep appreciation for the Catalina Foothills School District Foundation, for your generous support of the district and specifically of our professional development program. The Foundation's unwavering support of CFSD has made a tremendous impact on the ability to empower educators, which in turn enriches the experience for our students in the classroom. Professional development is the cornerstone of educational excellence, and it equips our teachers and staff with the tools and the strategies and the inspiration, really, that they need to foster growth and success in our classrooms. Each year, our educators, through staff surveys, tell us they value the opportunity to learn and collaborate with their peers. And because of your tireless fundraising efforts, and I know that they are tireless fundraising efforts, and the underlying generosity of our CFSD community as a whole, we can provide our teachers and staff with those collaborative opportunities to innovate and build skills that directly affect the learning that takes place in our schools. The Foundation's efforts have a direct effect on the success of our students in this way. On behalf of the board and on behalf of the entire district, I thank you for believing in our mission to create a caring and collaborative learning community that is dedicated to each student's academic achievement and personal excellence, and for fostering our vision that learning in CFSD transfers to life beyond CFSD, which enables each student to become productive and responsible citizens of the global community. So I thank you for being such an incredible partner in shaping the futures of our students, and along the way nurturing our talented educators as well. We, the board, are truly grateful for your investment in our success. We look forward to our continued cooperation in this important endeavor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Should I leave it there?
Sure.
Sure.
That was lovely, thank you. Thank you again to the foundation. Thank you, Eileen, for your remarks about the importance of the collaboration with the foundation. We are finally getting to the public comments portion of our meeting. I did not receive any purple sheets. There is no one left in the audience. And I don't think there's anyone online, correct? Okay, Ms. Sams is indicating that nobody is online. Okay. So next we move to our consent agenda. It has been the long-standing custom of our governing board, although I have no idea when it started or why it started, that the vice president makes our consent motion. So the consent agenda has 12 items on it this evening. Is there any board member who wishes to pull any item from the consent agenda? With no items being pulled from the consent agenda, then, is there a motion?
Yep. I move the governing board approve consent agenda items 5.1, the governing board December 10th, 2024, regular meeting minutes as presented. 5.2, the governing board December 10th, 2024, executive session meeting minutes as presented. 5.3, the governing board December 13, 2024, special meeting minutes as presented. 5.4, the expense voucher memorandum as presented. 5.5, the field trip request memorandum as presented. 5.6, the fundraising request memorandum as presented. 5.7, the personnel memorandum as presented. 5.8, the acceptance with gratitude of the gifts and donations memorandum as presented. 5.9, the updates to the sole source vendor list for the fiscal year 2024-2025 as presented. 5.10, the School Facilities Division Award to Breckenridge Group Architects for the assessment of the brick archway at Orange Grove Middle School in the amount of $2,495 as presented. 5.11, the K-12 core and supplemental resources as presented. And 5.12, the approval of the agreement reached in resolution of pending litigation, United States District Court Case Number 423-CV-0318-RM as presented.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
I forgot to say aye, but I also didn't say opposed, so
sorry.
I was included.
I thought I
in the
heard aye.
Sorry, I was.
I figure since you make the motion, you're going to vote in favor of it. Why would you make a motion to vote against it? Unfinished business. Item 6.1 is
Your favorite.
my
Your
favorite.
favorite, yeah.
Item 6.1 is the approval of revisions to policy IMG and Regulation, IMG-R, Animals in Schools. This is a second reading and an action item for this evening. I will turn it over to Dr. Bartlett.
Yes, so the language in our policy IMG and regulation IMGR is being updated and clarified based on the American with Disabilities Act. So after the first reading of the policy on December 10th, which seems like a long time ago, there were some recommended changes, and I've highlighted those changes in yellow for you. And specifically, the inclusion of a statement that the policy itself is referring to service animals, but the regulation is really referring to both service and non-service animals. Additionally, that the service animals are allowed on school buses and in other district vehicles. That was important. And then at the bottom, we added 2 of the legal references that needed to be included for this policy update. All of the other recommended changes that were presented on December 10th have not changed, and those are there for your review. Do you have any questions about any of that?
That's the policy. You're talking about the policy, not the
That's
regulation,
the policy.
right? Okay.
Yes.
I didn't have anything on the policy.
Okay. Then in the regulation, after the first reading, the term non-service was added to indicate that the regulation pertains to non-service animals, which is different than the policy. Typically, policies are the what, and the regulation are the how. This is a little bit different in that they're different types of animals, right? So service animals and non-service animals. So it's a little bit different than our normal policy and regulation format. But this is how ASBA has formatted these new policies, or these revisions to the policies. But after that first reading, including that term non-service was essential. And then the first paragraph was relocated down below the portion specifying the documentation needed to bring any animal on campus, just so that we knew, what the requirements were going to be. Other than that, all of the recommended changes that were recommended on the 10th remain the same. Really, this is about the responsibility of the pet owners and the principal to maintain or ensure that the animals are safe to be on campus and that they have all their recommended vaccinations and things like that. So,
Questions for Dr. Bartlett?
I do have one question.
yes.
And this, as I was reading this, I was thinking about my daughter's experience at Manzanita primarily, where every once in a while there would be a teacher saying, who can watch the classroom pet
Right.
over
The weekend.
spring break, fall break, whatever. And granted, they're not dogs, they're not animals that are of that high maintenance. But just wanted to make sure this didn't put any obstacle in place to the kid taking the turtle on the school bus home for a week or anything like that.
No, it doesn't. In fact, because it's actually going to ensure the safety of the animal going into the home, right? Because we're going to have all of this documentation on that they are vaccinated, they have their proof of licensure and things like that. So it's going to actually not change that at all, except make it safer, because the family's going to know what is the status of the pet coming in, or the animal coming in.
I have a question. So you have this, the way the regulations been rewritten, you are proposing that the initial paragraph start with the following documentation will be provided. So does that documentation pertain to service and non-service animals?
I think it's just non-service animals.
Okay, that's how I read it
Yes,
too.
non-service animals.
So to me, it makes more sense for the first and second paragraphs to be reordered, so that the policy starts out with the general statement, non-service animals may be brought into the classroom. And the second paragraph then is the following documentation will be provided. I just think that it's more readable that way.
I agree, but this was the recommended change that you made the last time.
I did it that way?
Yes.
Well, what do you know?
I agree.
I changed my mind
I even
again.
had it on my
Yeah.
page that it should go above that.
It's obviously, it's not substantive, it's just,
It's just rearranging.
It's just rearrangement,
Rearranging,
and
I
we
think
can
it just
still
makes more
approve it
sense.
tonight with that change as amended. But I agree with you that that little introduction about non-service animals may be
Yeah.
brought into the classroom,
yeah.
should go above.
So service animals don't have to have that documentation?
Wait, let's go back to the
Yeah,
policy
I don't,
real quick.
Because I would think any animal would have to have proof of vaccination, proof of current licensure.
Right, and the policy says the regulation pertains to both.
Yeah.
yes.
So I would think the documentation, and I'm guessing that the documentation
So
applies to both
You
service
probably
and
need to put
non.
service and non-service.
Yes.
So you, maybe what you can do is leave it ordered the way it is and say the following documentation applies to any animal, service or non, brought onto campus. And then you go into that non-service animals may be brought.
Sure.
You don't even have to say service or non in that front paragraph.
Yeah.
But I would think that all of this information is required for any animal, service or not.
Yes.
So I think that may be why you made the changing.
Yeah, I don't know,
Right.
I can't say why I did it. Who knows what I was thinking a month ago?
Yeah, that's
When
true.
I
It was a
wrote
while
it.
ago.
And in the actual policy IMG, it does state at the very beginning that the policy pertains to service animals. The regulation
Is
is
both.
to both.
Yeah.
Right, so we just need to add a couple of words in that sentence. If we can, decide what those are, somebody can do an amended motion. You could just say the following documentation will be provided to the principal for any animal brought on our campus. Something to that effect, I don't know.
Period, as appropriate. Oh, no, it would be a period.
I don't know what the as appropriate is for, honestly. Following documentation will be provided to the principal for any animal
Animals.
brought onto campus.
Well, you're not gonna spay or neuter a lizard. So that,
Yeah,
that
true,
wouldn't be
as
appropriate.
appropriate, as appropriate, prior to approval.
Oh, okay, I see what as appropriate's for then, okay.
Yes.
Prior to the approval, okay, gotcha. So, any animal, that's all we have to do,
Snake.
any animal brought onto campus.
Mhm.
You ready for a motion?
Is the board ready for a motion? Have we resolved any lingering questions or suggestions? Looks that way.
I move the governing board approve as amended the revisions to policy IMG and regulation IMG-R, animals in schools, as amended.
You have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the revisions to policy IMG and regulation IMGR, animals in schools as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, folks. And moving on to our new business. Item 7.1 is consideration of revisions to policy KI and regulation KI-R, visitors in schools. This is a first reading presented by Dr. Bartlett.
Thank you. Policy KI and Regulation KI, visitors to school, is being revised to provide clear direction to our schools on who is allowed to visit schools while the students are on campus. So in the policy, in the first paragraph, it was reworded to indicate that the superintendent will establish procedures for the visitation of persons other than the school personnel or students on campus. So that's who visitors to campus are. Other than student and personnel, even parents are visitors to campus. So the policy is really about who's allowed to visit campus. So in this policy, then, that was the only change that we've made, except the adopted date. We did find one error in the legal reference that defines weapons that was not included. So in the next reading, I'll put that legal reference. It's 13-3101, and that defines what a weapon is. And that's part of, you're not allowed to bring weapons onto campus. So we need to put that legal reference in so we know what is considered a weapon. So that will be included in the next reading.
Dr. Bartlett, the reference to 1302 at the bottom, that's transposed. It should be 3102.
31.
Yeah, and actually 3102 refers back to 3101 with the definition of weapon. I don't have it's better to be more inclusive than less inclusive, but just, I live in the world of chapter 13 of this.
Okay. So I
It's on a
will,
revised statute, so I knew 1302 wasn't right. It's actually 3102.
3102. Well, I'll include 3101
And
and
3102.
3102 for both of those in the next reading. And then in the regulation, the first paragraph was revised to include language that visitors other than parents need permission from the school principal to visit campus. Now, is that written permission? No. That's a permission. We're having an event. That's an invitation. Okay, so it's not going to hinder parents or grandparents from visiting campus if there's an event. They don't have to get a written permission from the principal. It's not going to bog down the principal in ensuring that every person. So that's what that means. The section was also added regarding private service providers. Specifically, the regulation will prohibit the visitation of representatives of external agencies and private providers, and then the definition of private provider is also included. This new section has been added to preserve the limited time that teachers have to provide standards-based education and related services to students, as well as remove space and supervision requirements that are necessary with visitations by external agencies. And then finally, a statement that the restriction will not apply to law enforcement personnel, child protective service caseworkers, or visitors invited by the teacher or school personnel. So an example of private service providers would include an outside therapist, an outside behavior therapist coming into the schools to work during the school hours instead of privately with the student.
So a family would have a therapist come during school hours and ask to pull a child out of the regular course of study?
Yes.
And have we had a problem with this in the past?
Yes.
Okay. What if it was before or after school?
It's still a supervision issue. They're not employees of the district, so we don't know about their fingerprint clearance. We don't, all of those things. They're not employees of the district. So it's a supervision issue.
Visitors are different than volunteers. That was one of my
Yes.
questions. I'm sorry, Gina.
No, sorry. No, Mr. Scream.
Can you talk about the distinction between a visitor and this policy and something, like we've approved policies in the past, for example, where grandparents have had to be fingerprinted and they appear on our personnel memo. So
Right.
what's the difference?
Well, a volunteer is, so fingerprint clearance, if you're speaking specifically about fingerprint clearance, okay. We have our policies for our certificated and non-certificated staff, and that's regulated by our policy as well as state statute fingerprint requirements, which extend to any person who's going to be working with a student one-on-one, potentially out of the eyesight of a direct, a teacher. So if they're gonna pull them into the hallway or something, a volunteer might work with a student that way. They have to be fingerprint clearance because they have direct access to students. And that's regulated through the state statute for fingerprint clearance. So are they visitors to campus? Yes. They are also visitors to campus, but by the sheer fact that they are a volunteer as well, that's an invitation by the principal and the personnel to visit their classrooms.
So as a practical matter, if the parent is the volunteer, no fingerprint.
No fingerprint, correct.
But if the grandparent, aunt, uncle, cousin, whatever, then that
Any other person.
carrying on from that, just to make sure that I'm clear. At the start of I-R, where it says visitors other than parents are permitted with permission of the school principal, and you gave the example of like an invitation to the school players and such thing. That could extend to grandparents, for
Oh,
example,
absolutely.
or
Yes.
family friends,
Yes.
et cetera.
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't preclude
No.
that. Okay.
No.
And then I do have two other questions, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Going back to, I believe it was KI, visitors to schools, and it says, oh my goodness, somewhere it said while students are on campus.
Right.
And I'm struggling to find.
On school premises is the last three words of the
thank you.
first sentence.
Thank you,
First
yeah.
paragraph.
Whilst they're on the premises. So does that include care times, for example, before school starts and after school ends?
Yes.
Does it include sports events in the evenings?
Yes.
Help me to understand, so for example, a sporting event where doors are open, help me to understand how this policy
Well-
then manifests itself.
Right, so, which is why we took out control visitation, because it's not a controlled aspect at that point. So, when we have the open events, that is an open invitation, and we can't control who is visiting and who is not. It's an
Yeah.
open invitation. So that's not a controlled access
Okay,
to the campus.
okay.
It's during the day when kids are really in classes and our campuses are closed down, that's the visitation, that they need the invitation. So they would need permission to come by the school personnel, by the principal, to gain access to a classroom.
And the care program, because that is a classroom environment, presumably the before school and after school care program, that would also then be covered in
Yes.
that way,
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
right? Thank
Mhm.
you. And then my second question is on KI-R, for parents who wish to visit a classroom during the school day. Is there a time limit that is or can be placed on the duration of such visits?
It's not written in our policy, but yes, that can. This is different than auditing in class at the high school. So we've had that question. This is different than I want to audit the class that my child's in at the high school. And I want to sit in there and watch for 60 minutes of that class period. That's different. This is pertaining to coming to typically volunteer. We don't let them observe the classrooms because it's disruptive, and there's a confidentiality issue as well. So this is really about visiting their classroom when there's an event, when the teacher wants volunteers, upon invitation, really, is what this is pertaining to. So, yes, we can put a time limit on it.
Okay. So when that, for example, when the teacher or the principal is contacted, depending on what the request
Yes.
is and the context there, they could
Yes.
say, you're welcome to come for an hour or
That's
whatever the case may
exactly,
be.
yes.
And so if a parent made a request to audit or to, that sort of thing, this is not the policy? you
This is not the
recommend?
policy, no.
Okay.
We have a different policy for them.
To audit class at the high
Yes.
school?
And prohibiting auditing
Yeah.
the class.
Pardon me?
Prohibiting the auditing of,
Prohibiting it, okay.
auditing
I
of
was gonna say,
classes.
I didn't think
Yes.
that we did that. It says visitors other than parents are permitted with permission by the school principal, and parents are encouraged to visit school. Okay, I've answered my own question.
okay.
I have not answered my own question. I like that the policy is very clear about what parents are able to do in terms of access. And it may be defined somewhere else that I haven't gotten to in the policy manual. But when we talk about parents, are we also including guardians?
And legal, you're right, we need to, we
Yeah, we've
usually
been trying to
have
change
legal
that.
guardians. I will put legal
We need
guardians.
to change that in all this, don't we?
That's so funny. We've been, every policy, we've been trying to do
Yeah.
parent
We
/ guardian,
Legal guardians.
legal guardians.
I will include that for the next reading, thank you.
Good catch. questions, concerns? This will be back for a second reading, so you'll have another opportunity to ask any questions or get clarification that you may need. Okay. Moving on to item 7.2. This item addresses consideration of revisions to high school courses and programs for the 2025-2026 school year. This is a first reading, and I invite to the podium Cheryl Castro, our Executive Director of Curriculum and Assessment, to tell us all about it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
I know there was a problem with putting it here before. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy
This is so much
2025.
better.
Yeah, you
What's
have
your problem?
better seat now. You can see, right?
I can see you.
Okay. So presented for your consideration this evening are the proposed high school course and program revisions for 2025-2026. These revisions include changes in the eligibility procedures for one component of our high school academic honors award program, as well as changes to social studies, career and technical education, and world languages. So on page 86, at the bottom of the page, you'll see the rewritten, the changes for the high school academic letter program, and this has been expanded to include more kids, essentially. So you'll see that for students in grades 9, 10, 11 who meet the eligibility requirements, they not only have the silver award now, which is 4.20 or 4.0 GPA or above, they also have the blue award, which is 3.75 to 3.99 weighted GPA. Students still have to be enrolled in at least 6 classes that determine GPA, which means that a P grade does not count. And the eligibility will be determined now by averaging the students' first semester and second semester. This is the big change that everybody loved. First semester and second semester GPAs in a given academic year. And they may earn this distinction in each of grades 9, 10, and 11. They'll be notified in the summer of their achievement, and then there'll be a ceremony planned at the beginning of the following school year for them. And then what remained the same was seniors in grade 12 who have a cumulative GPA of 3.75 or better over their previous 7 semesters. They'll still have the opportunity to be recognized with either the blue or the silver award as outlined in that previous paragraph. So if you go to page 87, you'll see that these changes are meant to reduce confusion that parents, students, and even some faculty had about how these awards were determined. So currently, eligibility, it's hard for me to even explain this because it makes so little sense to me, but previously, if you're a freshman, they would count your second semester of freshman year and your first semester of sophomore year. And so because of the way the timing happened with the awards that usually were in May, and so they couldn't, it was just a problem with logistics, which meant that first semester of freshman year, as one student pointed out to a counselor, doesn't count.
Right.
So something that we don't want kids to be thinking that their whole first semester in high school doesn't count. So now they'll be counting the first semester of freshman year and the second semester of freshman year, averaging it together, and then they determine if they get the blue or the silver award. And again, the updated parameters for eligibility will also help students, freshmen, be recognized for the academic excellence that they achieved during their first semester of their high school. So I'll stop here if you have questions about this before we move on to the next session, or we could wait till the end, you decide.
I do have a question, if I may. Can you clarify, please, does this replace the academic letter, the part of the academic letter which is based on quarterly grades?
Yes, they're going to be going by semester now.
Well, that should be the headline. That's like the best news ever.
We thought so too. The high school is very excited about this. The kids who they talked to were very excited about it.
Parents are going to be very excited. It makes so much more sense.
Yeah, there were several situations that were explained to me where a student who was doing really well, for example, in first semester of sophomore year and second semester thought that they were going to earn it, but they'd forgotten that, oh, it's second semester of the, and you know, the kids, you know, were a little disappointed. And so I think this will make it a lot cleaner for everyone.
So who says the award has to be done in May? Why not do it?
And that was the big, you know, there's a tipping point. Everybody just thought, we must do our awards in May. And the high school said, do we really? Seniors, yes, we have to do it in May. But everybody else, we can do it at the beginning of the year, right away in August. And Dr. Bartlett talked about how it's important that we make sure that it's right up front at the beginning of the year.
Yes,
Um,
to buoy
As
them
close,
for the
yes,
rest
as
of the
close as possible.
Yeah.
So that communication is typically sent out to students, I'm gonna say like March-ish, something like that. So presumably the communications will be updated because there will be a lot of parents who are expecting the communication this spring. And if they don't get anything and potentially have to wait until the fall, you might get a lot of phone calls and emails about it.
Principal Lambert said that they're going to be, how do you say, it? We're going to be rebranding this, that was the term that he used. And they're going to be publicizing a lot via Parent Square and other ways around campus through the counseling office. So yeah, communication will be important.
Yeah.
But everybody, I think, is going to be happy.
I think the only ones who won't be are the parents of seniors who are like, why couldn't we do this 4 years ago?
Makes so much more sense.
Sometimes it's the simplest thing. Let's move the ceremony.
And one less thing for us to do during that very busy, well, I guess it's usually the week before.
Yeah, well, we'll still have the honors program.
Yeah, no, of course, for the seniors, but not for the.
Yeah, have we been going to the academic, I guess I haven't been
Yes.
to the last
Yes,
couple,
we
so I
have.
forgot about that.
You were at the senior one.
I was at senior one, but I had not been to the
Perfect
academic.
example of
honors
structures
program.
drive behavior.
Yes.
Yes, that's right,
Our structure drove our behavior,
yeah.
which
Right.
changing the structure is.
And what prompted this change now? Since it's obviously been a long-standing,
The way I heard
on
it was they were
somebody's side.
discussing things that were within our locus of control that will help to reduce kids and parents' frustration and stress.
love that.
And so they said, somebody just said, well, honors, why does the honors ceremony have to take place in May? And everybody else said,
Wow.
mic drop. It was one of those moments. So
That's
it's
great.
good work being done at the high school.
Moving on to social studies.
Social studies. So social studies, you'll see that the changes presented are for our advanced placement social studies courses, and that they have to do with the benchmark of a B or better in prereq courses. And the reason that this one was put in place is that our teachers and counselors have noted that students who enter these courses, enter our AP courses with a B or better in the prereq courses tend to be most successful in these more rigorous AP courses. And so they've asked to put in the B or better in second semester of those prereq courses. And then you'll also see on page 87 toward the bottom under AP US Gov and AP Microeconomics that we added our fairly new, our recently approved courses that weren't on here before, AP Psych, American Law and Justice, and Perspectives on Modern History as possible prereqs. Still, the threshold of the B is important so that kids can make a good choice about which courses are the best for them.
We don't give letter grades, so does this need to change to
But,
rubrics?
and I am so with you, this is such a good point you make, Gina, because I am a rubric person, and so I've always had a hard time equating grades with rubric scores. However, when a teacher enters a score into our grading system, there's an equivalency that pops
I
up.
understand, however, the students don't see that, and the parents don't see that.
The students don't see the B? That's news to me. When I was in the classroom, my students could see their letter grade.
I mean, if there's a hidden way for students to do it, however.
Plus, there's an equivalency document, like in our syllabi.
There is.
It'll
However,
say,
wouldn't it be, given that, there is an equivalency guide, but wouldn't it make more sense to have the documentation aligned to the way students and parents,
we could put the
as well
rubric
as
score in
teachers,
there.
see the data?
That makes more sense.
We can replace it.
You don't want them to have to go to 6 different places.
But their
to-
transcripts will show a letter grade,
Yeah,
so they do have access to their transcripts to see those.
I don't think transcripts show letter grades.
Well, that's, yeah, because they have to be shared with
college and
colleges that work with letter grades. That's why
True.
I'm sure the transcripts say, well, I shouldn't say sure, my kid's been
They
out.
do.
Maybe the transcripts do, however, I will say that's not.
I can change
that's
it to the
not where
rubric
students
score
look
for the
their
next
No,
reading.
it's probably not
You
what
know,
students look for.
It probably should have both.
If we're
Yeah,
asking them to look
both.
at second
Both.
semester, then it should be
/B.
Where they look
Yeah.
at.
As a classroom teacher, I spent a good deal of time training my students never to look at the letter grade because it meant nothing.
Yeah,
The rubric score meant
the
something.
rubric score means something,
So
exactly.
from that perspective, it probably does make more sense to have the minimum, the minimum rubric score that they have to.
All right, we'll put that in there.
What is the
Because
current?
now you're gonna do this throughout the whole course catalog.
Yeah. Great, it'd be, well, luckily they have the equivalency doc that we can use. It won't be that big of a change.
What is the current? Is there no? What
So
is
the
this a
current-
change from?
Everything in red is new. And so, for example, AP US History, the previous prereq was just World History or AP World
I
History
see.
That they had to take the
with no
class.
parameter.
Right, they're just taking the class, anybody in the class. Is there any mechanism for discretion for a student who
Is
may
anything
not-
ever black and white? There is definitely, when you work with kids, come on. If you have a student who comes to you and says, I did not earn a B in my prereq course, and yet I really want to take this AP class, and here's why. The high school is not going to stand in the way of that kid. What they'll do is they'll conference with him and probably the parents, and they'll talk about the challenges that student might face and the things they might do to overcome those challenges. These are guidelines.
So does that also apply if they didn't take one of the prerequisite courses?
I can give examples from my own practice where I had students who went from Spanish 1 to Spanish 3, from one academic year to the next because of the way that they progressed. Spanish 2 is a prereq for Spanish 3. But then there are kids who are doing different things, and so you have to have discretion.
Do we have a process in place, like for them to follow as we decide, as you all decide, if they're able to?
The kid expresses an interest and/or the teacher sees that the kid is ready. So I'm thinking about in language, you can see when they're ready. And so when the kids go to enroll in courses for the following year and they say, well, I guess I'll go into 2 the next year. It's like, no, you're ready for 3 because right now your proficiency lies here. Elsewhere, a student might say that they didn't get a B in world history, but they really want to take AP US history. They'll talk to their teacher, they'll talk to their counselor. They'll have those conversations that I mentioned previously. And they'll move on there. There's no written procedure for any of this.
I'm thinking of my daughter who ended up in AP Environmental Science as a senior and didn't have any of the prerequisites and loved the class. I mean, now she's majoring in that.
And so she probably
So-
talked to somebody about that, right?
The counselors put her in.
There you go. Yeah, so.
Now, my concern with that is I put myself back in high school brain and I would look at that and go, oh, well, I can't do
Can't
it.
do it, yeah.
It wouldn't occur to me that there might be a mechanism to ask permission to get around it. Is that something that could be addressed? Or are you inviting more trouble by introducing the idea of discretion into policy?
I think it's as a parent and as a teacher, I think it's a good idea to show what a benchmark is. So that what we have found in the past is that students who earn a B or better in these courses tend to be very successful in the AP Social Studies courses. So as a parent and a teacher, I would like to have that. But if I'm in the Foothills community, I'm pretty sure I know I can go talk to the counselors, I can talk to my teacher, I can talk to them about my plans for the future, what I want to do. There is a lot of flexibility at the high school, since way back in the day.
I've
A
also
lot of
found
flexibility.
that the teachers are really good at approaching the students when they feel, hey, you really should consider AP Spanish Lit or what have you, right? Personal experience as well as anecdotal from friends and other parents at the high school, the teachers are very good at provoking those conversations, or prompting, I should say, those conversations by the students as well.
Experience as well.
As long as that's, because the word prerequisite to me suggests otherwise. It says if you do not have this, you cannot proceed.
Yeah.
Versus benchmarks and guidelines that are saying, hey, we know you're gonna.
We are using the word in a very relaxed way. I think if you go to a university and there's a word prerequisite,
Right.
it'd probably be more difficult to get into
Yes.
that next level course.
Right.
But this is their high school career.
And it sounds to me like when courses are being selected for the next semester, It's not like in college where you just sign up and, you know, it's like an algorithm on the computer, did you meet the prerequisite or not? It sounds like there's
There are
more
conversations.
conversation that's taking place.
Well, they all have ECAP planning.
They all have recap planning, and they all
So-
have to meet with their counselor
Sure.
about their
Yeah.
course
So they
selections
have
as
many
well.
In
opportunities
some
to
examples,
discuss.
a teacher has to sign
Yeah,
Yeah.
have many opportunities.
form.
As long as there's a collective sense that this is not an obstacle to a
Right.
student who could thrive
Sure.
based on a past bumpy road.
And the 8th grader selecting courses for the first time will have that same information? Is that
Yes.
fair to say, that the,
The incoming 8th graders will have the same information. I would think that if I were the parent of an incoming freshman, I would really look at these parameters closely. I'd look at my
Yes.
child.
yes,
I'd look at the other courses they were taking, make a strategic decision. The phrasing that I was given when I talked to the high school team was, they said, it's not our practice to stand in the way of students' aspirations.
oh,
I like
That's what
that.
they said. So,
May I ask a question about AP Psych, please? I understand that it's in our social studies pathway, and so I understand, on the one hand, why the prerequisites are US history and AP US history. However, psych also has a strong scientific component, and so I'm curious as to whether a prerequisite for AP Psych, whether there was discussion that an additional prerequisite for AP Psych might need to be a certain level of science class.
I did not hear anything about a science prereq. I could ask them if you wanted them to consider it.
What do my colleagues think?
Well, I'll add mine to that because I had a very similar question about AP microeconomics, where it's been a minute for me, but I remember the math. And none of this in here has a math component to it, but that's essential for microecon. So I don't know if there is.
I know that one concern is
Same.
starting to add lots of different content areas as prereqs. Might come across as being more of a barrier. But I'll ask them. So possible math.
I don't really understand, I hadn't thought about this until you asked your questions. Why, for example, unless it's just the fact of an AP class, or I'm not understanding, US history would indicate potential success in psychology. Why psychology or law and justice?
I think it's more about the rigor of the course, if they're able to deal with the rigor of that course.
Okay,
Because these are all AP courses, and so it takes a certain type of thinking, a certain type of commitment. And so if you're able to show success in one area
okay,
for AP US history, you probably will be successful with another AP course in the same social studies
it's not
sequence.
necessarily substantively foundational.
Right, and that's why I think they probably were veering away from adding the science and the math, but I don't know for sure because they didn't talk about it.
It may also have
They're talking about making sure that the students are ready for the rigor of an advanced placement class, which is
Right.
basically a university level class.
Charlotte, might it also have something to do with the fact that these classes are taken freshman, sophomore, junior year? So by the time that they are eligible to take AP Psych, we want them to have taken their freshman and sophomore social studies classes and requirements prior to taking that. Is generally why, because you're right, the content of AP Psych is very different than the other two.
Right.
And I think those would be the only two areas that, in my mind, would require going back and saying, hey, do we want to gut check on psychology with the science component, on with the math component? Because in both of those cases, you've got the humanities part of it covered, but there will be kids who will very much struggle with that course material without the other piece of it.
At
Okay,
the AP level.
I will ask them.
I had one other minor question, which is, we have or in for all of these. Hypothetically, if you've taken 3 of them and gotten C's and 1 of them and gotten a B, Is this a sidebar conversation? Is that a, well, no, I qualify, or is this where a teacher or a counselor goes, rethink that?
I think
It goes back to discretion, right?
I think the or was intentional, because anybody can have a bad year with a bad course, but if you can show that you did well in a previous AP course especially, chances are good, if you're interested in the subject matter and you're aware of what the rigor that it implies, you're gonna do well. I like the ors that we have in our course guide, the ands, because I remember kids, life is rough and sometimes things happen. And sometimes that grade doesn't always reflect exactly what you could do because life got in the way at a certain point. So I really like the ors.
Any other questions on the social studies portion?
And I very much admire the intent behind it, producing it. So I understand why that's really important.
Thank you. CTE? Okay, so you will recall that CTE often has changes in the course guide because of the certifications that change based on JTED requirements or on the work-based learning guide that Carrie and her team has to follow. Also, we have some courses in development, the ECE classes, early childhood education, where they're still designing exactly what's happening. So there's some shifting around that way. So the changes that you see here, some of them we've put in the benchmark of a grade, like a C or better or B or better, again, because they've had a chance to see what kids can do, and they found that kids who earn these scores are the ones who tend to do well in these courses. Again, there are always options for changing that when you go in and talk to your counselor, but this is the benchmark for it. There are also some additions to these courses. If you'll see on page 88 at the top, the second course listed, Advanced Biotechnology. They added the line about students being required to participate in the SARSEF fair, which has been a tradition so far, but it was never written into the guide, so it's placed in the guide now. You'll see that some of the certifications were changed for the next two courses listed for AP Computer Science Principles and AP Computer Science A. Students will earn the Python and Java certifications. And then here's a fun one. Digital photography 1, 2, and 3 in the middle of the page on page 88. You'll see that they're requesting to change the lab fee from $80 to $60. And that doesn't happen because they're finding that the fees for supplies, for services, are less than they had predicted they would be because of the digital aspect of the course. So that's going to be going down to $60. And then our ECE pathway, Early Childhood Education 1, 2, and 3. There have been some changes with that as well. As usual, it's in the certifications that students are earning, and this has a lot to do with our PCC courses and JTED requirements about what certifications can be earned in each course. You'll see highlighted in red there which certifications will be earned and then which PCC courses will be taken. You will also see next year some more course changes because you'll recall that when Carrie and her team implemented this, it was kind of on a scaffolded system where they had semester 1 and semester 2 were doing certain certain certifications, but then they have to flip the semesters to make sure that our incoming kids get the same experience as the ones who are already in. So at the end of like 4 years, we'll have it all ironed out and everything will be smooth, but there will still be changes, I'm sure, in some of the certifications and maybe some of the PCC courses we'll see based on some changes that are often made. One of the changes that you might have noticed for ECE1 is the removal of the line about students having the opportunity to observe in the Early Childhood Learning Center here at the down at the VVELC. They decided that the first course, what they're going to do instead of the actual observations is they're going to spend more time preparing students for those observations in the second and third year. And instead they'll be doing projects such as field trips to a children's museum and reporting out on and analyzing a particular exhibit to talk about how it's developmentally appropriate, in what ways it can support child learning at that. And then they're also planning a field trip to ASU so that they can learn about career options in the field from specialists there. So those changes are in place for the coming year, and This is the first year that we'll be implementing ECE 3, the third course in the series. And then another big change that we were excited about, I didn't know about this. After teaching at the high school for all the years that I've taught there and knowing the guide, I didn't realize that our freshmen and sophomores were not allowed to enroll in yearbook. That was news to me. Because they come out of, I remember when I was at Esperero, and the kids were really jazzed about yearbook. And so what happens is they come in and they're not allowed to take it, and then by the time they're juniors, they have other interests develop, and then their yearbook bug is gone. And so this is an attempt to open it up to freshmen and sophomores so that we can grab their interest at a young age, and then we can keep producing these fine yearbooks that we've produced in the past to create kind of a dynasty, as Carrie said, a dynasty of yearbook teams.
I wonder what the reason was for precluding freshmen and sophomores.
I'm not sure. I have to say this was a big surprise to me. I always thought there were freshmen on the team.
It used to be that there wasn't room in the
Right,
classes.
I was
that
gonna
what it
say
is?
enrollment.
It was enrollment.
Yeah, that there, because it's a shared position with the graphic design teacher.
Ah.
And so something had to give.
So there were a limited number of slots.
So that actually leads to my question, since.
What's gonna
we've
happen?
gotten to this. So I know that enrollment in that class is severely down this year, and so I like the change. However, how is, and this is rhetorical, I don't expect you to answer at this point because it's a first reading, but my encouragement would be to dive into how is that going to be managed then for next year? If there's, I would anticipate a lot of freshman and sophomore interest
so,
in that
yeah.
class. I would also anticipate that there are current sophomores who've been waiting to be in that class, so will they be given priority to have that class, for example? And for course scheduling to be done so that they are able to take that class that potentially they've been looking forward to for the last 2 years. Same comment
Really
about
good point.
seniors, if they already took it this year, they're eligible to retake it as a class that you can repeat year on year. So I would appreciate when this comes back to us, a bit more detail around how that transition is going to be managed.
Certainly. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so
Good
much.
question. That's all I have for CTE.
Sports medicine, we cut you off, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you want to
Oh,
speak to
yeah,
sports
sorry.
medicine?
Forgot about that one.
No, it was our fault, we interrupted you.
Sports medicine. So when the students go out into the community, they need to be wearing something that identifies them as a student from CFSD. And so they're working with a vendor. This was not added as a fee because it doesn't go through us. It goes through a different vendor, where they're doing their internships. They're going to be supplying these scrubs that are going to have the embroidered logo and Catalina Foothills School District on it. And so they'll be required to pay that $40 fee.
Which is when we visited the JTED,
Yeah,
we saw
right. Remember
similar
that?
to that.
Yes.
So it'll look more like, we went to the JTED.
Oh, down
main
to the,
campus.
yeah, to the main campus.
But even though it's not a fee being paid to us, should it not be approved by this board since it's going to be a fee that the students have to
It
pay?
would have to come through the fee schedule, wouldn't it, I think, yeah.
I thought I heard you say
Yeah.
it wouldn't come through our fee schedule because it's not being paid to us, but I think it needs to be there.
I think you're
Okay.
right.
Because they can't take the class without, they can't do it without paying the fee.
Or if they needed financial assistance.
Distance,
Yeah.
they need to know, yeah.
Okay, I will add that in for the second reading.
And then may I go back to digital photography? I'm excited that the fee's being reduced. I think that is really important. It increases the accessibility for all of our students. My question there, again, I don't expect you to have an answer at this point, but when you come back to the second reading, there are certifications in digital photography that I don't know if there are costs for those certifications, but my question is, by reducing the fee, does it mean that students or parents will then have to pick up costs for any certifications or that type of thing? Or maybe there's no cost related to those certifications?
No,
So maybe a reduced fee doesn't affect
this is
it.
separate from the certifications. It doesn't have anything to do with those.
Okay,
So,
okay. So totally separate. So reducing
It was
the fee
truly the-
isn't going to negate a student's ability
No.
to pursue it.
the way that Carrie explained it was that they were monitoring the funds, the fees, and then their supplies and everything they were purchasing, and they realized we don't need to be charging kids
Okay.
this amount for
Okay.
this.
CTE does have grants that cover the majority of any certification that has to be paid for.
I
Great.
thought I understood that you generally aren't paying for
No.
your own
Those
certifications
are
when you
paid.
go through our
Currently
CTE
not, I
classes.
just, yeah, I just wanted to make sure fee reduction wasn't going to negatively affect that, but thank you for the reminder about, the grants being available for that.
In line with the other comment about fees from Eileen earlier, if students are expected to participate in the regional SARSEP pair, do we have any sense of the financial obligation for that?
I don't know, do you have to pay a fee to be in SARSEPs?
That one I can actually speak to if you want me to, which is that
I mean, even travel or something?
it goes through the field trip.
Okay.
And there's not an additional fee to that beyond, for the students to participate in it.
Perfect. Okay.
I can only say that because I had to sign the form last night.
There you go.
Yeah, firsthand knowledge.
My only other comment on CTE is just I'm excited to see the Python certification on there. That is such an example of how you can take a skill that you can put to use in the real world right now. So it's
Agreed.
great to see something like that on here.
Agreed.
Anything else on CTE?
Cheryl's like,
Going once?
Ándale, pues, aquí vamos. So I'm not going to hold you hostage tonight. That will be at a later date when we talk about the standards that we changed and some key documents that we changed. But these are the proposed revisions for our 25-26 courses. I just wanted to remind you that the state board has not adopted new standards. These changes that we did were prompted initially in 2017 by the publication of the Necessful Actful Can-Do Statements for Interculturality. That's when we started changing some of the ways that we addressed language and culture in an integrated fashion in the classroom. And then that led to our need to change our standards, which you'll hear about at length or at a later date. We also, as you probably saw in Dr. Bartlett's goals this year, that as we studied over the last 2 years, we talked more about the importance of acquisition-driven instruction using brain research and very specific strategies to help students acquire, not learn language. And so that was a focus of our work together this year, which was also reinforced by the idea of our performance-based and proficiency-oriented program that's grounded in the idea of proficiency targets and outcomes per year. So those are the changes that you're going to be seeing in the course descriptions that I'm going to be presenting. Also, the idea of, there were no changes made to the pathway itself, but the course descriptions, and the course descriptions that you see are essentially the same course descriptions that we've always had, with just a little bit of editing and more focus, making sure that every course mentions in some way the idea of language and culture together. So specifically and explicitly mentioning culture. For our AP courses, we went back to the College Board to align our wording more closely with what's presented in the College Board course descriptions. And then we made some adjustments to the prerequisites and the targeted proficiency outcomes for some of the courses. Again, that was based on the review of the research that we did on proficiency targets and realistic expectations for growth in an academic year. So you'll see the changes in red on pages 89 through 92-ish, 93-ish, 93. Spanish 1, what we tried to do also was to align the descriptions for Spanish 1 and Chinese 1, because even though they're two completely different languages, what we're addressing in those at a novice level is essentially the same. You'll see some changes because of the logographic nature of Chinese. Since it's a character-based language, you'll see some mention of characters and the idea of tone, tonality, and the number of characters that students need to learn within a year. So in Spanish 1, Spanish 2, 3, 4, there are essentially no changes. When you get down to Spanish 4 on page 90, you'll see that there's a red strike through of advanced low. One of the things we did back in 2010 when we first had our major revision was for some of our targeted outcomes, we left a range, like intermediate high to advanced low. And after some discussion, we realized that that was a little bit redundant, because in every class, we could say for Spanish 1, it could be novice high to intermediate low. So really what we need to put is just the lower end of the target, understanding that after the first week of any language class, people are all over the proficiency scale. And so we didn't see the need to keep that higher end of that range there, because we understand that you are going to have some kids who maybe go beyond that intermediate mid into intermediate high, advanced low, advanced mid. So it's not necessary to keep that there. Again, that's one of the things that teachers talk to kids about when they register for language classes. They know that just because you're in Spanish 3 doesn't mean that you're all intermediate mid. Some might be intermediate low, some might be intermediate high, and that's going to guide where you go next and what you do. So on page 91, you'll see a few more examples of that where we crossed out the higher end of a range because we know it exists. There's no sense in writing it there. You'll also see on page 91 under AP Lit and Culture, we changed the prereq to focus on presentational speaking instead of interpersonal speaking. Our program is really based around the idea of speaking, interpersonal speaking, which is this way, two different people. But in AP Lit, it's more presentational because students read and then they present. It's an actual lit course with analysis involved. If you move down to the community service abroad, we have, back in the day, there was a certain time when we had a large number of students from Catalina Foothills High School attend Amigos de las Americas for service program. It was extremely popular. And then it dropped off a little. We're seeing a slight increase in the number of kids who are participating, but we decided to put this line in about participants must contact the department chair prior to departure to arrange for proficiency pre and post testing, because we were finding out that students were attending the program, but they weren't talking to anybody about it. They were just doing it. And so they usually didn't need the credit that they could earn with this, but they might as well earn it if they've done that. And anybody who's in an immersive environment, our kids who do this when they come back, they definitely show an increase. It's very difficult to immerse yourself in any linguistic environment and not increase somehow your speaking ability. So that was on page 91. Page 92 is where we start our Chinese, and you'll see we did the same thing. We moved some of our reading outcomes. First, Chinese 1. Novice mid, we used to have just interpersonal speaking was novice mid, but we realized that the reading was also at novice mid, not at novice low. And that's not because it's easy to read in Chinese, it's because when you're at a novice level, it's a very finite number of characters that you need to be able to read at the novice level. We'll talk more about the inverted pyramid next time. It's good stuff. Same thing through Chinese 1, 2, and 3. You'll see how we changed. We pushed reading to a different level. Chinese 4 remained essentially the same. Again, with the changes on page 93 for reading, moving the skill of reading to a different proficiency level. And AP Chinese language and culture, the same. The summer experience abroad, we've done that twice, I want to say. And we had our own staff lead the trip with students. We've decided that if that trip happens again, it's more cost effective to hire a professional tour company to arrange the trip, to lead the trip, chaperone it, and then we'll need a minimum of 15 student participants, and then there'll be 2 staff members who'll need to attend with those 15 students if that happens again. So far this year, there hasn't been any interest. It's not that there's not enough interest, there hasn't been any interest so far. So next year, the World Languages team is talking about how they might ramp up some interest in this particular part of our program. And to be quite honest, during one of our conversations, we talked about getting rid of the summer experiences because of the waning interest, but I think it's going to come back. And so we didn't want to take it away in case somebody wants to travel and learn language very quickly, very quickly. And that is World Languages. Now, if you have any questions about World Languages, I got you.
you, if anybody else does. Okay, so, this is awesome. Of course, this is your bailiwick, so I would expect it to be awesome. Thank you so much. With regards to the Chinese summer abroad experience, I do appreciate your comments there about the purpose of this and trying to sort of reinvigorate it. I am, just a couple of points of clarification for when this comes back for a second read. Given that it's a summer, where it says the grades, could we clarify if this is rising sophomores to seniors, which is my assumption? But if
Sure.
that could be clarified.
That's a
that would
good
be
point,
great.
thank you.
And
That's
could-
what we intended, so yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And then how long is the Chinese summer experience?
It depends. It really depends on the group that's traveling. The times that we've gone, the people got together and it was like 3 weeks was too long. 1 week wasn't enough. They landed, I think it was 12 days with 10 in country.
I mean, I'm wondering if something like that should be, some verbiage around that potentially could be added, that, you know, since you've added the note about a professional tour agency, maybe that, you know, the trip would be somewhere from
10 to 15
Maybe I
days.
could just say the length of the,
Yeah.
15 days.
And
yeah.
because it
15
says
days.
summer experience abroad
Yeah.
implies
A
All summer
long
long.
time.
all summer long.
so we could say 2 to 3 weeks. Trip length will be determined by participant interest,
For
something like
example,
that.
yeah. And then I'm also wondering about the cost of that. So given that we're a public school, one could read this and assume that there's no cost to be paid for it. And I would think that would not be the case and that there is a cost.
It says
Well, I
fee
put the
TBD.
fee
to be determined.
TBD.
It's there, I mean,
Right.
again, I'm putting myself in the parents', trying to put myself in the parents' shoes. We've talked other places in the course book, which is where I assume this would appear, and fees are $60 or $20 or $80. I am deliberately playing devil's advocate here. We all know that a trip isn't, you know, that that's not the case, but I do think that we need to be kind of clear on, you know, expect a fee of X and that the final fee is determined with the professional tour agency, for example.
Okay, I can look for an approximate fee.
Well, I noticed that we did Spanish, it says for fees, contact the company.
Right, so
yeah,
similarly,
like
it would be fees dependent on,
contacting the
Right.
travel company.
Yeah, although we don't want the parents to contact the travel company, that would come from the school presumably, right?
no.
Don't we arrange, who arranges the trip?
We choose the travel company,
Who does?
the team chooses, usually it's
Yeah,
gonna be
the teacher team,
Explorica,
right?
yeah.
You're talking about Amigos, or you're talking about this?
No, the
Chinese-
Chinese one.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We've never done it before with a travel company, we've always done it ourselves. But I imagine we would choose something like Explorica or one of the ones that have,
And presumably a teacher would manage that tour agency, right?
2 teachers would be in charge of making sure that everything is planned out. They'd be the liaison between the tour company and the participants. They would be there for the tour.
Yeah, I just think what might be something to consider is how do you handle fees within that context? And then going back to Amigos, I know that that's a very expensive program to participate in, extremely expensive program to participate in. And so not knowing what a potential cost might be at this point for Chinese trip, I'm offering this purely as an observation and potentially something for you to consider before you come back for the second reading. Should we, or could we, look at the equity between those two programs? And is the cost going to be similar between those two programs? Or are we able to bring in the Chinese one at a much lower cost point than the Amigos one, for
I think
example?
it depends on when the trip is gonna be taken, where they're going in China. I mean,
Yeah,
typically
that's gotta
China
be
is much more
designed.
expensive just for the travel.
Yeah.
For the travel, it's gonna be more expensive to go to, in our experience.
Yeah.
Even with Amigos, it's, the part of Amigos that is expensive is typically not how to get to Ecuador, how to get to Mexico. It's your housing, your lodging,
Yeah.
the excursions they take. That's the expensive part of that trip. And so I think they're two very different trips.
When you say that is costly, what is
Well, in
that?
Amigos, my daughter did it in Nicaragua, and they don't allow parents to pay for their own
Exactly.
child
Yeah, they-
more than X amount. They require fundraising. Doesn't mean I can't make a donation, but I can't make a donation for my own kid beyond a certain level because they require
everybody to fundraise. In fact, they require you to send out 100 letters to your
100
closest
letters.
family and
Yep.
friends.
Exactly.
So it's a whole shebang, it's a whole program, it's a big deal, this Amigos thing. Great experience,
It's
excellent
great experience. I'm just,
But, so it's hard, I mean, we could find out from Amigos what that parent contribution is for their kid, but there's more to it than that because they are going to be expected to fundraise.
I mean, the Amigos trips, I think, cost, I agree, yeah, absolutely. And I guess what I'm actually driving at is, I think the Amigos is not an option for a lot of our families. And so if we are willing to stand up, so to speak, a Chinese summer immersion trip, is there an appetite to look at doing the same for a Spanish immersion trip that
Instead
is
of
more
Amigos.
accessible?
Instead of Amigos, is
Instead
Or
of
in
Amigos.
addition to, whichever,
Right.
that would give potentially a more accessible.
We've talked about that, and we've talked with kids about that, and we could talk with them again, but the answer we usually get is, you get something different out of Amigos than you do out of a tourist trip. I'm gonna just call it a tourist trip to China.
100%.
And when kids come back from Amigos, they increase their proficiency by a minimum of one sub-level. Typically, it's 2 or more sub-levels that they increase their proficiency. Plus, the service-oriented nature of the program changes kids internally in
I
ways that
totally agree with you.
yeah, and so it's a,
Talking about in addition.
I'm talking about, in addition, I'm talking about accessibility for our families.
To me, you're talking apples and oranges between the Spanish
are.
trip and the
Yep.
Chinese, right, because 4 to 6 weeks or what, or, doesn't it say that?
6
4
to 8
weeks,
even
6 to
with
8
Amigos,
is
depending on where
way
you
different
go.
than 10 day, I mean, this
It
is really
is.
a tourist trip.
It
The
is.
Chinese
But that's,
trip.
that's what I'm driving
So-
at, is should we be offering comparable, so putting Amigos to one side, because I do think it's a great opportunity, and I think it's great that kids can apply for credit there. If we're standing up a Chinese, what I'm trying to express is if we're standing up a Chinese trip, should we be considering standing up a Spanish trip as
It's
well?
less involved and expensive.
Less
than-
involved, shorter
That's more of a
duration.
tourist trip than.
It's 2
I don't,
weeks, not
to
the
be
whole summer.
honest, I don't think we have the capacity to do that. Because it requires a minimum of 2 of our staff members to commit a significant number of weeks during the summer to traveling with students, which, by the way, world languages teachers love to do. But not every year. Not every, and so one of our problems has been with the Chinese trip is, well, we haven't really ever had one where people wanted to go. We had enough people who wanted to go who committed. But it was hard to find teachers who were able and willing to commit to that length of a trip. So far, this has worked out well because the students, and I get I get what you're saying about offering a comparable tourist trip, but as a teacher of languages, I know which trip I value more in terms of language.
Yeah, she's not talking about replacing Amigos as an option, but
But my point is, and I can ask more, but we had a lot of conversations about it. I don't know that we'll be able to find, let's say that there's a year where things are going up and we have kids who want to go to China and kids who want to go to Spain or to Mexico or wherever, Spain. It will be difficult to find teachers who are willing to commit that kind of time in the summer. We could do it. We could invite social studies teachers to chaperone it. We could invite math teachers to chaperone it.
I have a provocative comment on this. Is there an opportunity not to look at it as a Chinese trip, because I know on there that there's no language requirement for the Chinese trip? Is there an opportunity to look at it as a world languages summer trip that's open, and one year maybe it's China, the next year maybe it's somewhere in South America, do you see where I'm going with this? And so it checks the boxes of cultural experience and travel experience and language experience, but in a slightly different way. But now I'm getting out of,
No,
it's not my area of expertise at all. I'm purely trying to.
I had my
Look at
own
options.
provocative question, which is, why are we going down this road at all? Why
That's
are we
a
as a
fair
school
question.
district promoting or offering credits for, Amigos? There may be other organizations, right, or the value of a trip, a 10-day trip. Why is that I remember Jake did a trip with Chris Lambert, NAP, was it? AP World History, AP Euro. They did, and it had nothing to do with, I mean, it had to do with school and that it was his classmates and it was led by, but
Well, Amigos is very clearly going to immerse the children, the students in the language and the culture. I mean, they're living in
but we
people's
don't,
homes.
but we don't, they could do that.
They can't.
I mean, why does?
Independent of the school
All we're
district.
doing
I
here
guess-
is allowing them to get credit, if they're gonna do it, allowing them to get a credit for it if they want it.
Well, exactly, so that to me
That's
is
all
the
we're doing.
difference.
Comments,
That's the difference between, like, so what, I mean, what is the value of a trip?
So I can give you some history on why it came about. It was when we started our immersion program, the parents said that they wanted a culminating of, actually, they wanted to have a trip in middle school. That was, we couldn't do that. We just didn't, we didn't have the capacity. They wanted a trip for parents and students at the middle school level. We couldn't do it. And so we told them that we would implement a high school trip to China. We'd make an opportunity for students to travel to China if they wished to do so in their rising sophomore through senior year. So that's why it was placed in the course handbook for no credit because it's a tourist trip. But again, you learn, when you go to China, you're changed in a different way. The culture is pretty striking. The differences are, Dr. Bartlett can tell you about her experiences in China. It
Yes.
changes you. You don't come back linguistically competent, but you come back different.
I've been there.
Yeah. So that's why it was placed. That's why the two trips were a little bit different.
I'm still wondering what is the average cost for the community service, the Amigos trip?
I don't think any of us in this
No,
room know tonight,
okay.
but there's probably a number we can come up with in terms of what parents can.
I can
pay
look for
and
the
everything.
parent contribution.
That would be my first question if
Yeah.
my daughter came to me and said, I would like
Yeah.
to do this.
Amigos has that published online. Look it
Yeah,
up
it
online.
is expensive, but as has been mentioned, they require everybody to fundraise. They want to make sure people who want to go can go.
I mean, there's no I just keep looking at this Chinese trip and I'm just trying to figure out if there's no credit and it's 10 days or 2 weeks or something and we're asking staff people to do, I understand the value. I'm a huge fan of traveling and favorite thing in the universe is to use my passport. I think it's the best way to learn and to make the world a smaller place. So it's not that. I guess I'm just questioning why we're injecting ourselves into this as opposed to saying, hey, we'll help facilitate just like Chris Lambert did many years ago. There's a group of families that wanted, we're gonna do this trip. It's not school. You know what I mean? Like, so. I don't-
Non-school sponsored trips.
It wasn't a school-sponsored trip, but
I actually really agree with what you're saying here. It's not our business we're not in the travel industry.
we study many, many places, not just, I know this is a world language, but this doesn't actually fulfill the language.
There's no course
There's no
they're signing
Right.
up for.
There's no
It's the
course,
culture, it's
which
the
I do
cultural
think
piece, the
differentiates it
culture.
from the opportunity for Spanish. And I know that in our world language program, the only languages that we'll give credit for, even though students can earn the certificate of biliteracy, in other languages, they still must take Spanish and Chinese in our place. So I understand that it's not like a student who studies who could do his or her own program in France for the summer, and you're not going to get a world language credit in our place for having some proficiency in French. We are only focusing on Spanish and Chinese. So I understand the connection to the Spanish summer program because it does offer a substantive and an evaluative, a measurable increase in proficiency in the language that we require, but that's not the case for Chinese. So that's my question. I don't think we could resolve it. I mean, it's just, we're spitballing, so I
Yeah.
haven't thought it through, but
Take it back and
Take it back.
When's the last time we were able to field a trip to China?
When, you remember when Scott took, was it 4 years ago? No, it was
Or
before the
more.
pandemic. It was
oh, wow.
Yeah.
2019.
So we haven't had the interest
I think it
to
was
run the trip anyway.
2019, I think, was the last.
Might be
and
the year.
usually not 15.
Pardon me?
And it's very rare to get 15.
15, yeah.
No, I think he
That
took,
might be the
he took
answer.
8
Is-
kids, I
Yeah.
want to
Oh,
say.
wow.
There's no interest in it.
Right.
But yeah, we should probably stop belaboring the point. In my humble opinion.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you for bringing this to us. Lots of questions, things to think about
We'll talk about it tomorrow.
and talk about. And this will be back on our agenda in 2 weeks. So thank you. And that brings us to our discussion and reports. 8.1 is discussion and report of the Arizona School Boards Association new board member orientation, which was held on December 18th, 2024. That day was attended by both of our new school board members, Jacqueline and Tom, and also by Eileen and myself. So, who would like to discuss? Report.
He's listed first on the agenda.
Okay.
First of all, I appreciate you and Eileen being there so that we could ask questions in real time, because so many questions.
And in the car on the way up.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I
Oh,
have
yes.
a list as always.
Yes. We divided and conquered.
So what we learned is topically, very topically, about governance versus operations, and really what the role of a board member is, and that's something that I will try to be very mindful about going forward. Policy and how changes are tracked and communicated, and I noticed in my email today I got an alert from ASBA about a policy change. So, the big one was open meeting law.
Always is.
Yes, and it came home with a book, which I have studied a few times, and probably will have more questions about as time goes on. For me, what I found really interesting as a lifelong Arizonan was the presentation. I know Tom might feel a little differently about the different kinds of school funding that we have in our state, and especially this year with Prop 123 needing to be moved forward again. And SMART goals. One of my favorite things is to measure things, and learning about how SMART goals can help our district and help us move forward. For me personally, overall, it was really fascinating to see all the different school district representation, right? Big districts, small districts, rural districts, urban, suburban districts, and with that, just the different people, period, right? I tend to be very myopic in scope about my own little school district, and every now and then I might think about what else is going on in Tucson. Don't really think about too much what else is going on in Arizona. But the challenges in talking with some board members from other districts are so varied. We have some districts where kids are going to school on horseback. Right? So it's really just almost inspiring to think that all of us are there for a common purpose because we support and care about public education. We have different challenges, and we are going to work within the frameworks that we have provided by the state and the laws that we have to do our very best to provide the best education for our students with what we have. And just really, and coming away, I felt so fortunate to be in Catalina Foothills School District, such a collaborative environment among the board members. So much knowledge to be gained and shared. I didn't feel like I was going to be a fish out of water too much, especially every time I could lean over and ask Amy and Eileen a question. So for me, it was just overall very inspiring. We did stay for a couple days afterwards and attended a couple other sessions, but for me, the meat of the matter was that first day, for sure.
And yes, I do. The school finance part was,
Mystifying.
well, it wasn't even that. It was just more of like, okay, but at the end of the day, they tell you here's how much money and you can spend that. So where it comes from and all of that, while it's important and interesting and significant,
They tell you can spend this money from that account.
Yes,
Right.
because each
If you have
bucket
permission,
has
right.
specific uses.
Yes.
Not knocking the complexities of it, but I think just pragmatically, I was looking at that as more of a, well, it's more or less set with a little bit, we'll have our budget discussions, we'll
Right.
have a little wiggle room there. I was definitely sweating the open meeting law
Yes.
and have studied this puppy a lot. And I do think it was also really helpful as we got our other handbook about what it means to be a board member. That really connected to what I wish, I wish I knew then what I know now, where our esteemed colleague Eileen was on the panel.
Oh, yeah, she did it.
And it just sort of it I think was a bit of a reality check to say a single board member can do nothing. It takes 5 in our case, and it emphasized to me the importance of the collaborative relationship that we have, our ability to communicate and the shared vision that we have. So that to me was probably the biggest takeaway, was more on the culture side. But then agreeing again with Jacqueline, the strategic planning, goals, and progress monitoring, which we'll revisit in the full recap. But just, if you're not measuring it, are you doing it? So, that focus on measurement is something, as a data guy, was really happy to see come up over and over again as well.
I think what's really interesting is, you think you want to run for school board, you are elected to school board, and it's not like you attend an interview and they say, and we're going to do this. You have a general sense of what happens, and then you attend new board member orientation. You're like, oh, this is really what happens. And I'm not saying I didn't think it was a serious thing. I'm very much aware this is a very serious thing, but you're like, this is a lot. And
Actions.
there is.
Tell you what
and-
you're supposed to do
And
and
there's
allowed
things
to
that
do.
you need to be very mindful about and cognizant of. And overall, just, going back to what Tom said about you're one of 5. I have my own opinions. Everyone around this table has their own thoughts and opinions, but you really do have to have a collaborative nature and really wanting to put the needs of the district ahead of any agenda or anything else, and really also pay attention to what's going on, with the state and the federal government, so that you can be aware how to best position your district for the future.
I pitched a story to Dave Hatfield for the Desert Leaf. I've been elected a board member, now what? Now it just starts. It starts right after, the election is a big deal, right? But now what, after the election, there's so much stuff to learn and do.
It goes back to those 2 books that Tom and I have studied a few times. For me, I know you've studied them a few times as well.
Well, and, your comments about the public school finance portion of it, I think they did get into the nitty-gritty a little bit too much. I would like to have seen them take that time, a lot of that time, and dedicate it to open meeting law, and that was part of my comments when I left that day, was that they need to beef up the amount of time that they spend on the open meeting law for brand-new people, and back off maybe on some of those other things, or, add to the agenda, because it's the most important thing, to keep us all out of trouble.
They skipped a bunch of the case studies.
Yeah,
And for
they
me
did.
as a
I was
lawyer,
really disappointed.
that's how
Because they
you
were
learn.
running out of time and they skipped all the case studies at the end.
There's I think it's called Bolts.
Yes, they're coming up at the end of the
Yeah,
month.
which is, they go much deeper into open meeting law there, so you may want to consider attending that.
You know, I
And
looked
the ASBA Law Conference that we'll attend in
Yes, they'll do it again.
September, they'll have many sessions on the open meeting laws.
I was disappointed actually, because I looked at Bolts, and on their agenda, they just have 50 minutes dedicated to open meeting law, which is kind of like,
Well,
we-
they really need to
We
change
have
that
a board
emphasis.
study session in February, and if there's interest from the board, we can have our own conversation about open meeting law, and maybe Lisa Ann, we could talk about that, but maybe that's something.
We have Dr. Camersell coming to that one, do we not?
We have Dr. Camersville coming to our next board meeting.
Our next
to
board
do-
session.
Yes, for
Study
study
session.
sessions
Okay,
on
okay.
school finance.
That's a
On
really
school
good idea.
finance.
If-
So so before we leave December 18th, I have to say, so Eileen was on this panel, What I Wish I Knew Before.
But I wish I knew, as a brand-new board member, what I know now. Or what I wish someone would have told me back then. I don't remember exactly, but it was fun.
So at the end of the session, they had each of the panelists pick a song that,
That
that
aptly describes a board service.
aptly described
yes.
board service, and I don't remember anybody else's. But Eileen's was, I Will Survive. It was great, and she was the last one, and it was a great way to end that session. She got a big round of applause.
I could not figure out how to answer that question. I'm like, God, I have no idea. There's like 1,000 millions of songs in the world. AI
Really?
gave me I Will Survive, gave me Under Pressure by David Bowie, which was my favorite choice, but she wanted me to do that one.
That's really funny. And so, Tom, you mentioned, well, Jacqueline, you mentioned that there were the additional 3 days that the three of us stayed for, which was the annual conference, but this time, there was a track for new board members as well. So, why don't you said, I'm gonna save that for the regular session.
Kind of bounced in and out of that track.
Right.
Between the two of us. I think, there were a few, we all attended the keynote, which was one of those kind of big feel-good turnaround stories.
Yeah.
The breakouts that I attended, one was around parental engagement, one was around embedding RAI, respect, affirmation, and inclusion, which was presented by our friends over at Tonka Verde School District. One about building stronger communities through school participatory budgeting, which I thought, how on earth would you get a community to agree on anything budget-wise? And it turns out it actually means give the kids a little bit of money and let them vote on what they want to see in their own school.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. Take 10 grand out of each school's budget, let the kids vote, teach them the marketing, campaigning, putting their ideas out there, and then actually applying the funds to the winning thing. And gave a great example. There was a school that hadn't had bathroom mirrors in a few years.
Oh, yeah.
And they ended up voting for their money to go to that. And the mirrors haven't been touched since, because it was a student. They're not going to get vandalized when you're the ones wanting in there. And then there was one about aligning efforts from boardroom to classroom for real impact, which was another one where they showed a lot of dashboards, a lot of measurement. There was a really data-heavy component to that, which I liked. So I kind of just wrote out my overall themes across all of these sessions. First was how much of a resource ASBA is, especially for interpreting legislation and recommending policy. Acknowledging the learning curve and complexities of open meeting law and policy, pacing yourself and recognizing limits to what can be accomplished as a single board member. Seems like the only thing you really can do is screw up really badly with open meeting law. Other than that, not much.
All by yourself.
That's right, all by yourself. That's the one thing you can do. The importance of collaboration and communication across stakeholder groups, from board members to teachers to parents and the broader community. And then again, data-driven decision-making and monitoring, systematic monitoring. If you have a goal, put a metric against that goal, and then track and monitor that metric. But that goes hand in hand with the importance of using storytelling to bring those things to life. So there was a lot of good stuff kind of cherry-picked across these different sessions that I think are valuable things as a board to consider.
I attended a really fabulous session about a school district that had to close some schools and how they got the community involved in reinvigorating the community around that, and what they used one of the schools for, which is a community center. And they developed all things a board game that businesses sponsored. It was like a Monopoly game, like just Monopoly, but Glendalopoly. And businesses sponsored sections of the board game, and you could go to any downtown business in this school district and purchase this board game. And their community center that they made from an old school, I wanted to hang out there. It was really neat. It had all sorts of neat resources, and you could use it for community events too, and school events and vaccination drives, or you know, what have you, whatever the community might need to thrive and succeed. And I thought, well, that's really a great turnaround story. And I attended another session about branding and marketing, and we are very fortunate in our school district to have a communications and PR person. And that was, it never occurred to me that schools
Those don't.
don't. But then after meeting people from across the state, I realized, oh yeah, schools don't. We are so lucky and fortunate that we are well along our journey of branding and communicating our district and really showing our community, our stakeholders, the value that our school district brings to our community and to our students and our families. And I would love to see that continue to grow. You know, really, this is a small town community, our Catalina Foothills. It's a very small community, and you run to Safeway, you are likely to see someone you know. And the value that our school district brings to that.
Yes.
Making sure that our community is aware of what we bring to our families, our students, our residents, our voters, everyone, really.
If you're listening to Spotify soon, you'll be hearing some ads for both Valley View Early Learning Center as well as Open Enrollment. That's our new. Good.
I saw a flyer on Facebook that
Oh, did
people
you?
could put in different pediatricians' offices and stuff like that. A little brochure, and I thought, this is really neat.
PR is very important. Telling our story and getting it out there in as many ways as we can and reaching the population how they want to receive it.
Right,
It's not, they don't want to go to our website.
right.
Right.
They want to up on their phone, so, yes.
I just had a couple of things to add, if I may. The annual conference started with a Native American prayer and hoop dance. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And a reminder of the cultural diversity of our state. And it was just, I just thought that was very unique. And it was really nice to see that recognition. I went to a breakout session that was about computer science and AI skills, and it was actually presented by Vail USD. And they have a whole program on how they're implementing AI and integrating AI with their students. So I'll show you the brochure that I got. So, and I know that you communicate with your so I thought that was interesting. And I also went to a breakout session. We have talked, we always talk about, our climate and our teacher well-being. This was about administrator well-being.
Nice.
And this was, the ASA, Arizona Superintendent School Administrators, did a survey of administrators, and they were really talking about the importance of also paying attention to how our administrators are doing. And I don't know that we explicitly talk about administrators when we're talking about our teachers, but maybe we should,
That's a fair call out.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting. I also attended, I was the delegate, if you recall, for the business meeting, which went pretty smoothly. And our dedicated new school board members, or because they had nothing better to do, actually sat in and watched the whole thing.
To be fair, there was a little bit of drama there.
There was some drama. There were some people who were nominated from the floor. That it always happens.
It always
happens that way. But do you remember the changes to the bylaws that we voted on? Those did not pass. And
Seriously?
I suspect they did not pass because they didn't hit their quorum. I think that was the issue. So.
Are they going to come back to us then? Or?
I don't know. I don't know. Oh, and they did, so just a couple notes about the conference, by the way. It was almost completely digital, which was paperless, which was, I thought, really nice. I thought it was run very well. I think ASBA has really been making improvements in their substance and in their process and how they're doing things. That said, in my opinion, too much downtime for the the annual conference. Awards are nice, but vendors, I mean, that conference could have been a day and a half,
Right.
maybe a day, yeah. And so, you know, I think whether we participate or not depends exactly on, you know, what they're offering and if we're interested in it. But speaking of awards, our school district.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I didn't do this. Was I supposed to do this? I'm so sorry.
It's quite all right.
I was a little overwhelmed. Eileen Jackson, in appreciation of your dedication, I hugged you and said thank you.
I forgot when I opened the meeting to introduce our 2 new board members
Oh,
and
my
welcome them
gosh.
profusely. Like, we're
Yes.
totally off today.
Oh, I'm so, well, sorry.
Welcome.
I have a nameplate.
Eileen, thank you. I'm so sorry. So our school board did receive a total boardsmanship award from ASBA, which has to do with the number of hours that collectively as a board we have spent. So there is one for Eileen. Hey, we're not there yet.
No, it's just the
Okay, we're there.
It's the plaque for the
It's
same
the
thing.
plaque. That is mine. There is a certificate for Doug. I'll give this to Amy or maybe we'll get to them. Gina, thank you so much. And Carol. I don't know if, like,
I will
Carol
see,
needs another one.
I know. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I'll
And-
see her at the foundation meeting.
Okay, and then as a board, we had our photo taken with this, I don't know where that photo ended up, but it is, the Total Boards Award, so I don't know, I think we've received it, I don't know if this goes like in here or in the district office.
I don't know what we
Received
do
it
with them.
before.
We
I don't know where
have.
we put it.
So I don't know where all
Usually at the
these.
district office.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. And so, and it is commendable, I mean, we are dedicated to continually, you know, it's professional development.
Yep.
Which everybody needs, no matter what the endeavor is. So, that concludes my remarks. Anybody, anything else about the conference you went to? I did think ASBA is doing a good job.
It sounds like they've improved the quality of this
Think so.
annual conference from prior years.
We will be attending the Bolts, 3 of us.
Oh, good.
We are?
And Jay?
Oh, you don't,
I did
We're
not
not?
know that, but I will make
it
sure.
is on January 24th.
Actually, don't know if I can.
Okay, let us know by Friday.
Oh, okay.
We are
Because
scheduled.
there's no reason for Denise to go if the 2 of you aren't.
Have you looked at the agenda?
No.
Well, it sounds like there will be another conversation about whether and who is attending Bolts. That concludes 8.1 and 8.2 about the school board's conference, leading us to 8.3, which is our cover memorandum, which is our, we always have, this is a standing item to enable us to talk about any governmental activity that may be happening pertaining, that may affect our work at the state legislature or federal level.
We attended a session today with the Professional Preparation Board at University of Arizona.
What is that?
And we had Rebecca Beebe, who is the governmental relations person for ASBA, present to us kind of, the legislative session started yesterday.
Yes.
And Governor Hobbs gave her State of the State. And she has basically 3 issues that she is really focused on, and that's Proposition 123. Getting that to be renewed before it expires. The aggregate expenditure limit, of course. It's already been approved for this year, but of course, next school year.
March, we'll be sweating in March.
Right, not this
No, they-
March.
Oh, they approved it for this March.
They approved it for this year already, so they did it in pretty decent time
Yes.
this year
Okay.
for once,
Okay.
rather than
Okay.
coming down to the barrel.
All
And
right,
finally, the ESA
good.
scholarships.
Yeah.
She
Good.
wants to rein those in.
They're running amok.
She wants to institute reasonable income caps on
Good.
qualifying
Good.
for the
Some
ESA program.
sense.
That
So,
makes some sense.
Those are her 3 some other, type things that may come up are a little scary. It was not the most uplifting of sessions, but I thought these three might be something to bring forward tonight, as far as Governor
And
Hobbs'
like
initiatives.
else, we have ASBA advocating for us at the legislature, and whatever comes our way, we will have to follow and handle. Future agenda considerations. Eileen and I have agenda planning tomorrow, but I think we have to have a conversation about
The 10 o'clock
timing
works
and
for
all
me.
that.
10 o'clock
So,
works. Yeah.
10 o'clock works for me.
Have we planned out who's on for agenda planning this, or is that on?
So the
Is that
only-
part of tomorrow's
That's
agenda
part of
planning?
it. So it's, my understanding from Amy Sams is that, so tomorrow will be, is
Yeah.
always President, Vice
Yes,
President, and then
yes.
the schedule will be coming out? Yep.
Okay,
Then it'll
perfect.
start rotating.
Because I was gonna say, otherwise I totally missed the schedule if it's come out.
No,
I've
no, no,
looked
no,
for
no,
it.
no.
no.
It had,
Okay.
I thought so too.
I'll put it out in the weekend review.
Perfect.
Yeah, it'll come out in the weekend review, and then if there's a date that doesn't work for a board member, if you can just let us know, then we'll arrange a swap.
And we just reserve it at 10 o'clock for the day, but if that's not the time that we can meet, we can change that. We just kind of reserve that time, and that's our start time.
Any other future agenda considerations?
Not at this moment.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll move we adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We're adjourned. Congratulations, you completed your first board meeting.
Questions? Nice job, guys.
It was a long one